We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Priti Patel has rightly called out the criminals at Just Stop Oil for threatening our food and fuel supply. But what is the Home Secretary actually doing to win the war being waged by eco-terrorists on the great British public? I'll explain why it's imperative the woke police stand up to these terrorists in my digest next. Then I'll get the views of my superstar panel, former editor and current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. As Boris refuses to rule out a political comeback...
What's your plan after next Tuesday, though?
I'm concentrating on today.
Will you rule out a comeback at all?
What I want to talk to you about. But I think, on the whole, people in this country are more interested in their gigabit broadband.
Should his likely replacement, Liz Truss, silence the Green lobby by drilling for more oil and incentivising fracking? We'll get stuck onto all of that in the Media Buzz at 10:30. As the MHRA backtracked by saying there's no evidence that the COVID vaccine is safe for pregnant women, did the government make a huge mistake by pushing the jab without medical proof it would do no harm? We discuss what could be a monumental scandal in our big debate just after 10. Speaking of scandals, should Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance face a criminal investigation over claims Sage Scientists airbrushed anti-lockdown views from meeting minutes? Freedom-fighting barrister Francis Hoare is adamant they should. He'll do battle with fellow barrister and former Tory MP Jerry Hayes in a fiery clash at 9:20. As Nelson Mandela's grandson blasts Meghan Markle for comparing her walk down the aisle to Madiba's walk to freedom, is it time Prince Charles and William launch an intervention to save Prince Harry from the monster of Montecito? It's Meghan on Meghan as top US journalist Mikhail Kelly takes down the tone-deaf Duchess at 9:45. But the Meghan publicity train never rests as another episode of her Woe Is Me podcast hits the airwaves.
If there's any time in my life that it's been more focused on my race, it's only once I started dating my husband.
I'll show you the hilarious moment where Mariah Carey branded Meghan Markle a diva during that broadcast later in the show. Despite 7 stabbings and hundreds of arrests, Sadiq Khan claims the vibes at Notting Hill Carnival were immaculate. So has the failed mayor got blood on his hands over the state of lawless London? BBC TV star Shabs Ahmad made headlines for calling out Khan's warped priority. He joins me live in the studio on that at 10:15. As GB News reveals Albanian gangs using Ireland as a backdoor into the UK, is our failure to secure our borders now becoming an existential threat to our national security? Nigel Farage tackles the scourge of illegal immigration at 9:35. Are the elites waging a war on masculinity to make us easier to control? Author and social media sensation Labour Halpern says the threat of tyranny is strengthened by our weakness. She's uncancelled that at 10:40. The newspaper front pages are on the way too. And I'll crown a brand new Greatest Britain and Union jackass before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. There's been an extraordinary twist in the battle of the BBC's highly paid autocue reader Gary Lineker and its highly respected Home and Foreign Affairs editor Neil Henderson. Now, you might remember, I told you last week that Henderson called out the politically biased former football star for constantly spewing his socialist nonsense on Twitter, breaking the corporation's editorial guidelines, which state that presenters' social media should not, quote, affect the perceptions of the BBC's impartiality. As a result, Henderson publicly asked Lineker, do you have the freedom to tweet about this sort of thing because you have a different contract to mine? Well, tonight, the BBC has, as ever, made the completely wrong decision, forcing Henderson to apologise to Lineker. He wrote, and this felt like one of those hostage video tweets, I'd like to apologise for earlier tweets now deleted responding to Gary Lineker. I should have shown more consideration to a BBC colleague as per the BBC's social media guidelines. What a disgrace. Gary Lineker should be apologising for the constant politically biased opinions he tweets while being paid for by the BBC with our money. This is just more evidence the BBC is a broken organisation and should be defunded. My digest on the eco-terrorists of Just Stop Oil coming up. Then my superstar panel weigh-in tonight. Former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. The Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson. And the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. But first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening to you. A huge amount has been promised to help with the energy crisis, with the Prime Minister saying today his successor will provide further support for struggling households. During a visit to Dorset today, Boris Johnson said announcements will be made over the coming week on energy security, including nuclear power. Admitting the country faces tough months ahead, he said a package of measures should offer a sense of hope and perspective.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Well, pubs and brewers are warning they could be forced to close within months as they face a 400% hike in their energy prices. In fact, 6 of the UK's biggest firms have now signed an open letter addressed to the government and asking for action to avoid irreversible damage to the industry. Some pub owners even saying they're struggling to find suppliers who could be willing to power their venues. An inquest into the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool has told how a police officer tried to save her life by using his hand to cover her gunshot wound as he carried her into hospital. The 9-year-old died after being attacked by a gunman who chased another man into her home just over a week ago. Despite medics' efforts, they were unable to save the little girl. A post-mortem examination found the cause of death had been a gunshot wound to the chest. And the Metropolitan Police has launched an appeal asking anyone who might have a photograph or video footage to help them in their investigation of the murder of a 21-year-old man at the Notting Hill Carnival over the bank holiday weekend. 7 people were stabbed at the event yesterday, including the Bristol rapper Takayo Nembhard, who was killed in the Ladbroke Grove area. The Met Police made over 200 arrests at the event over the bank holiday weekend, including 33 for possession of an offensive weapon. Pothole repair costs have soared as a result of the war in Ukraine. Around 60% of materials used to repair roads in the UK was sourced from Russia before the invasion. Councils are now saying they have to ration bitumen and find it from other markets, which is in turn pushing up costs and delaying repairs. Latest estimates suggest it'll take local authorities 10 years and £12 billion to bring all UK road surfaces up to scratch. You're up to date on TV, online and, of course, on your DAB Plus radio. You're watching GB News, where now it's time to go back to Dan Wootton tonight.
The despicable eco-terrorists of the extremist green organisation Just Stop Oil continue to wreak destruction on the lives of hard-working folk and British businesses attempting to cope with the cost of living crisis. These lunatics continue tunnelling near a major oil refinery in Essex in order to weaken the road and force it to be closed.
We are currently blocking tankers on St Clement's Way. We have got a tunnel just going underneath this railway bridge. We've been doing everything we can to get this road shut down, and we've been told that it's more important that oil continues to flow, even if a heavy goods vehicle driver dies.
As it is at the minute, they're not confirming that they will not reopen the road, and it is up to you to take care of your own safety. So if you feel unsafe, you should come out, okay? And I'll say what I said to the other guy: when I hear anything, I'll then come back to you and give you any updates.
Now, such idiotic and criminal behaviour has caused road closures, risked safety and impacted businesses to the tune of tens of thousands of pounds, including, by the way, disturbing the printing and distribution of the country's most popular newspaper, the Daily Mail. While 8 people were arrested, many others shamefully remain underground, even now, attempting to destroy roads, risking injury or even death. And that's just the beginning of the carnage this group of eco-terrorists have caused in the last fortnight alone.
I'm really struggling to breathe, probably because I've got really severe asthma.
Today, the Home Secretary Priti Patel hit out at the group, saying these thugs and so-called eco-warriors are waging a war against the British people by going out of their way with planned disruptions affecting our daily way of life. Our freedoms, our free press, they are in the wrong. They should be stopped, in my view. This is symptomatic of lawlessness in our country, where it's seen as okay for these people to behave in this way. It is not okay. The police must impose the full force of the law and not allow these protesters to get on site. Well, I agree, Home Secretary. But you're in charge of the increasingly woke police, who seem to be focused on negotiation with these zealots, not enforcement. I mean, this is a disgrace. Because if these common criminals were members of any other terrorist group, they would, without any delay, be dragged from underground and locked up. So why are they being treated differently? Because their law-breaking has an eco-slant. As Priti Patel explained, there are laws in place which should be used. Laws including arrest for aggravated trespass exist, and my public order bill will bring in new criminal offences for these tactics and protests. They are causing criminal damage and have criminal intent in the acts they are participating in. But the woke weakling, Assistant Chief Constable Glenn Pavelin, showed where the police stand by, pandering to the protesters, pleading, wait for this, we take the concerns of this particular protest group, its members and supporters seriously and are willing to work with you so that your rights to peaceful protests can take place without members breaking the law. The current action is dangerous and putting lives at risk. We encourage those involved to reevaluate the action they are taking. How pathetic. Constable, these are eco-terrorists breaking the law. It's your job to arrest them, lock them up, and bring an end to this lawless behaviour so you can focus on the epidemic of violent crime. To respond now, my superstar panel, former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. Now, Dawn Neeson, I'm sure you can probably tell I'm very worked up about this. I've been worked up about this.
You've been quite calm, actually, Dan.
OK, good. Because I just want people to understand that this mob of lunatics, these eco-terrorists, are actually tunnelling underground, trying to destroy our roads so that they pose a danger to the big vehicles that use them every day. It is disgraceful behaviour, and the fact that they are being allowed to do it by our woke police force, I think, is just another level of wrong.
Lots and lots of points on this, right? Speaking as the very proud daughter of an HGV driver, I just wish my dad was still around to drive over them in his lorry, because the tunnel would collapse and they'd possibly still be in there, you know, a nation shrugs. Or just fill it in with concrete, you know, whether they come out or not. Who cares, really? I don't, to be honest. And the other thing is, tomorrow night I'm going to London Derby, West Ham Spurs, right? If I so much glance at a copper in the wrong way, I'm going to be hauled off, thrown out the ground. How are they getting away with this? How are they getting away with digging under roads and vandalising petrol stations? And Priti Patel, I'm sorry, she's not doing anything. I mean, the bloke in charge, the copper in charge, he should be told by Priti Patel to get his finger out and get on with it. Why are they offering to make him cups of tea and ask them if they need anything?
I mean, Calvin, that video that we saw was extraordinary, wasn't it? The police officer almost like treating these folk as if they're trapped heroes who've somehow fallen down a well or something. No, they have put themselves there.
Listen, please, would you stop breaking the law? Please.
Please come out the hole. Please.
Ridiculous. This two-tier policing. It's because their cause is seen as just. They're allowed to break the law. That's not OK. It's not appropriate. But Priti Patel... I used to love her, bless her, but she's all talk. She hasn't followed through with a single thing. In 2019, when she came in, she said she was going to halve the migrant crossings across the Channel. She'd cut them all out by spring 2020. She says she's going to make the police enforce these laws. These laws have already existed for a while. If she wanted the police to follow through with them, she would clamp down on them. But she's not following through with her words.
Well, I do agree with that, but I do also wonder, Calvin, if this shows just the terrible state that the civil service blob and the establishment is now in, because they will literally ignore the will of a powerful Home Secretary.
Then get rid of them.
Yeah.
Sack the lot of them.
Indeed. Well, the thing is, it looks almost certain that we're going to have Suella Braverman, the Attorney General, as our next Home Secretary. She has tough talk, but she also has a really strong legal background, so I wonder if that's what we need. Rebecca Reed, what do you make of these Just Stop Oil cretins?
I don't have an issue with them. I have sympathy with their cause, though I'm not the best recycler. I think in terms of the police, perhaps what they should do is say, imagine you were at a vigil for Sarah Everard and then treat the protesters like women who were trying to put a candle down for a dead woman.
Or what about an anti-COVID vaccine or an anti-lockdown?
Well, I don't really care about that, but I do care. But it's not my fight, your fight. But the point remains. And I think largely it is because they're white and middle class, so they're not perceived to be threatening by the police. And I think that is an example of white privilege in action. But this is why I think we should defund the police. It doesn't work. Strip it all out, start all over again. It does. It's a completely rubbish service. It's not working.
To be fair, there've been 200 assaults, there've been stabbings and stuff at Notting Hill Carnival. The police have been twerking away. So it's not the fact that they're white or middle class, it's just this two-tier policing.
I know, but Rebecca,
I think London...
defunding the police.
Yeah, scrap the whole lot.
So what's your system?
I fully believe...
What happens when you're mugged on the way home? What happens when
my system would be that you have an emergency service like the firefighters. So if there is somebody in your house breaking in, you call them and their only job is to...
police.
No, because that's not what they end up doing. They're in charge of social care. They're in charge of negotiation with eco-terrorists. They're in charge of way too much stuff, and they're bad at all of it. The fact that police are in charge of most domestic violence things, when police commit more domestic violence per job than anybody else, is laughable.
Rebecca,
they shouldn't be doing social work. They shouldn't be doing negotiations.
They're
not well
trained.
trained.
The police need to get tough. Do you not understand?
The police need to only have. The police need to have one job. They need to have one job, which is arresting people and doing nothing else. The problem is they do far too much and they do it very poorly.
But you're saying you want to defund them altogether?
But defund doesn't mean not have a police. Defund means our current situation is rubbish. Scrap it and reassess it.
Have you actually looked at what happened in the very left-wing areas in America where they have defunded?
You have to defund it properly. Yeah, no, they didn't do it well.
Crime has
exploded. They didn't do it well. But I'm not saying
crime has exploded.
I'm not saying
crime has exploded.
I'm not saying it worked well there. But you can defund it.
So violent, Rebecca, that no one even wants to walk around it.
There are different ways of defunding. There are different ways of defunding police. In the same way, there's different ways of getting rid of state schools, of private schools.
Help, love. I'm sorry.
I think Rebecca's beyond help tonight.
I'm sorry. I fundamentally think we don't need them for most things.
I think Rebecca might have a point. Might just have a point.
See?
Hold on. with the eco-numpties in their tunnels, because I think we should defund the police in that incident, OK, and just let lorry drivers take over.
We need to make the police again.
But, but the army would deal much better with that because they are trained people who are good at this sort of thing. So the army, but you'd have more army. If you had no police, you'd have more army for this stuff.
Let me tell you, you were dead wrong on this, Rebecca. You've never been wrong on any.
No, I will try to be more wrong later on this evening.
Because this is not a solution. Defunding the police is not a solution. The solution is empowering the police. Stripping the police of this woke nonsense and allowing the police to do the job that they are required to do.
Which the army could do better.
The army can't police their own
the army
You'd have to
defend
more.
our country.
For what? I also don't think we really need an army, but I don't think we have time to get into that.
OK, all right. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness, this is Head to Send. Rebecca and Cameron Robinson, Dawn Needs, my superstar panel. And they're here all night. But coming up, as Albanian people smuggling gangs use Ireland as a backdoor into the UK, have our soft borders become a serious threat to national security? Nigel Farage tackles that worrying development to the legal immigration crisis. Well, it's an illegal immigration crisis as well as an illegal immigration crisis, really, at 9:35. But up next in The Clash, should Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance face a criminal investigation over claims Sage scientists airbrushed anti-lockdown views from meeting minutes? Freedom-fighting barrister Francis Hoare is adamant they should, but fellow barrister, the former Tory MP Jerry Hayes, disagrees. They're going to duke it out in The Clash next. Want to know what you think too? Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle @gbnews. We've got a poll running there too. Vote now. We're back in 2 minutes.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Nigel Farage and US media superstar Megyn Kelly still to come this hour, but right now it's time for The Clash. And as Neil Oliver and I discussed last night on the show, the revelation by Tory leadership hopeful Rishi Sunak last week that crucial minutes from SAGE meetings during the pandemic were edited to remove opposing views. Has that just exposed the shocking manipulation used by unelected health bureaucrats to lock down innocent folk like you and I? Speaking to The Spectator, the former Chancellor explained how he was alerted early to the fact that these all-important minutes were often had dissenting voices edited out, and said his official who sat in the meetings would tell him, well, actually, it turns out that lots of people disagreed with that conclusion. Here are the reasons that they were not sure about it. Now, that revelation has rightly been met with widespread fury, prompting barrister and legal commentator Francis Hoare to write of the former Chancellor's claim. This is absolutely shocking. If this is true, then those responsible, and it is reasonable to suppose that Whitty and Vallance were at least aware, should face a criminal investigation for misconduct in public office. So do you agree? Should the likes of Christopher Whitty and Patrick Vallance face criminal investigation in light of these allegations from Rishi Sunak? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. You can vote in our poll while you're there. The results coming up shortly. But here now, to argue his point further, is Francis Hoare himself and the fellow criminal barrister and former Tory MP, Jerry Hayes. Good evening, both. Francis Hoare, so can you just explain how a criminal investigation could happen based on what we know so far?
You'll have noticed, and it's important to make clear, that there were two caveats in that. First of all, if what Sunak said is true, that's obviously an important caveat, because we only have his word for it in a campaign in which he stands potentially to gain from this. Secondly, Whitty and Vallance were potentially involved. So what I'm not suggesting is that we target an investigation at two individuals. What I am saying is that we have evidence of a serious, what is a serious breach of trust, which is the manipulation of minutes to reject all alternative dissenting views. Now, there is very little guidance, it has to be said, on the making of minutes in Whitehall, but there is a 2001 document. And while the 2001 document says quite fairly that individuals are not necessarily named if they are dissenting and so on, one must expect accuracy in it. The reason why this is important, as you indicated, is because at the time, the minutes were not, first of all, they were not published, but they were made available to the government and to the cabinet. And it is reasonable to expect that the cabinet should be given an accurate view on scientific advice. They made up SAGE of a number of people from very many different disciplines, deliberately so that you could get a number of different views about that situation. As it happens, lockdown wasn't specifically advised by SAGE, even on the minutes without the dissenting voices before lockdown was actually imposed. And that was clear when the minutes were eventually published after a judicial review in which I was counsel. They weren't published before that. That was in May. But nevertheless, when they were published, it seems that we didn't get a true and accurate provision. Now, Jerry will obviously come in a minute, but the ingredients of this offence are that a public officer is acting as a public officer. Anyone who's making the minutes most certainly will be. The question of whether they willfully neglect to perform their duty, well, the duty is, of course, making minutes and making them accurately, and then to such a degree as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust in the office holder. Now, I'm not, of course, prejudging what any investigation may discover, and I've already said that the caveat is if Rishi Sunak said is true. But if it is true, I would suggest that at least it is justified to investigate it. People spoke about investigating the Prime Minister for this offence simply for hosting meetings in which he clearly wasn't acting as a public officer, because hosting a champagne breakfast or a birthday cake is clearly not him acting as a public officer. So that was a nonsense claim. But in addition to the claim against the Prime Minister, the suggestion he should face investigations for campaigning for Brexit, when, again, he wasn't acting as a public officer. But when people are taking minutes to go before the cabinet and then be published by the country for the country's purposes, they of course are acting as a public officer. So there can be no doubt about that. The question is whether or not there is misconduct and whether it is so severe that it arguably meets the test for prosecution. That's an open question, but one that should be investigated.
OK, you've set out your case well there, Francis Hoare. Jerry Hayes, surely if minutes from SAGE meetings were being edited to omit opposing opinions from the final draft, there should be a criminal investigation into why and how that happened.
Well, this is with respect to Francis. We're old friends. I remember when he was a pupil in Chambers doing criminal law, but I don't think you do criminal law at the moment. And there's no way you can stick on misconduct in public office. I'm not going to go into the law of it, but you really should know. It really is a nonsense. But what Rishi Sunak was saying, and the source of this story is in The Spectator, and I hope you've both read it, because he's not attacking Witty and Valance. Yeah, he's not attacking Witty and Valance. He's not attacking lockdown. The real gripe he has is this was all taken over by Number 10. Number 10 was making all the decisions and weren't consulting the cabinet at all. What was happening in SAGE? SAGE is a big body. Sometimes there'd be 50, sometimes there'd be more. Scientists are very much like economists. They will disagree. But what they did, and the whole purpose of the minute taking was, and these are the words of Rishi Sunak, was to distill something for ministers to act on. Of course there's going to be dissent. There's dissent in cabinet committees. There's dissent in cabinet, but you don't always make it public at the time, in the time of national crisis. The other big gripe that Sunak has is, one, he was being accused of complaining about schools, because I think this was a big mistake that was made. We shouldn't have closed down the schools at all. It has caused absolute disaster. There was no modelling. In other words, the Treasury was asked to take decisions based on something which, was very much up in the air.
Well, of course. Of course, but that's what Francis and I have been saying for such a long time.
Sorry, go on. Sorry, Dan, I couldn't hear.
Well, that's the point, though. You're making the point. That's what Francis and I have been saying for such a long time. The damage caused by these lockdown decisions was criminal. And I mean, Francis, look, no,
it's not criminal.
I think it was.
You could say just about every government decision is criminal if you disagree with it. Look, the definition of misconduct in public office: deliberately doing something which is wrong, knowing it is wrong, or with reckless indifference as to whether it was wrong or not. The defendant must know that a right-thinking member of the public to conclude that misconduct is so serious that it goes to the threshold test.
OK, well, that's the definition. So let me bring Francis in to say, Francis, do you think it potentially meets that threshold?
Well, I've just outlined. The point is, Jerry hasn't suggested that I've misrepresented or misstated what the test is. That is the test. It's a test for the jury. But first of all, it will be a test.
Your intro, Martin, has been that Witty and Valance should be indicted for misconduct in public office, which is nonsense and actually libelous.
No, Jerry, as you know, because you saw the tweet that was quoted, what I said is there is scope, there is cause to investigate whether or not officials were responsible. I didn't suggest that, as it happened in that tweet, that particular individuals should be. I said it is reasonable to suppose, thank you, Dan, that Witty and Valance were at least aware. And that it is an open question as to whether or not they authorised those minutes.
It's not the definition of misconduct in public office. Being aware, being potentially aware,
the question
is not a criminal offence. And you should know that.
Sorry, hang on a minute. The question is whether or not the public official is acting as such. We know that they were acting as a public official. The question is whether they willfully neglect to perform his duty. This is Attorney General's reference number 3 of 2003 for what it is worth.
And there's a
Willfully neglect.
2015 case as well. But it's nonsense what you're saying.
Well, of course.
Really,
And it is
nonsense.
always a question for the jury, and it always is a question as to whether or not the conduct is so serious that it is, as you said, that it is a criminal in nature. And we don't know this. But if it is the case that there were officials in Sage giving a clear and coherent alternative view, if it is the case that that was deliberately excised from minutes, it is at least a question mark as to whether or not that reaches the threshold.
Yes. And Jerry
of being so
Hayes,
serious.
given
And it's a
that we
question
now
mark,
know,
and the question can only be answered if an investigation investigates that. That's the point.
Francis, just hold for a second. Jerry, given that we now know that these lockdowns potentially killed tens of thousands of people, they may end up, and I'm very confident they will end up killing more folk than people who actually died from the virus. Surely, at the very least,
nonsense,
you want
it really
an investigation.
Is. I'm sorry, that is just nonsense. And that
How is it
ship has
nonsense?
sailed.
How is it
It's
nonsense?
205 people died. 205,000 people died. But the
Well, do you know how?
difficulty-
Well, no, you've just said that what I've said is nonsense, Jerry. Do you have any idea how many people are going to die from missed cancer operations, from heart attacks at home, from strokes at home, from suicide, from alcohol addiction? No, at this point, you have no idea.
I have every idea, and that,
Well, how
and that
many?
I agree with. I was
How do
talking,
you know?
No. I was talking about I was talking about the criminal investigation. What you're saying is nonsense. Of course, it shouldn't be a criminal investigation. I'll tell you why. If it was behind closed doors, yeah, perhaps let's have a look at it. But there were representatives of departments there. There was a representative of the Treasury there. There was a representative of Number 10. There were several, in fact. There was a bit of a row at the time.
Yes,
But
and we've
Dominic
got
Cummings was
the
there.
second most powerful person in the country revealing that the minutes from Sage meetings were edited, which resulted in opposing opinions being omitted from the final draft. Francis Hoare, I'm going to give you the final word. Isn't it so shocking that Rishi Sunak has blown the whistle on this lockdown disgrace, and the vast majority of the mainstream media are completely ignoring this topic because they are in the tank for these lockdowns?
It's a non-story.
It's not a non-story. If you think it's a non-story, Jerry, then you've lost all your news sense altogether. Francis Hoare, final word.
Yes, and the point about these minutes is irrespective of whether this reaches the threshold of a criminal investigation, the more important question is that the public, when these minutes were published, were misled as to the extent of government advice in what is an unprecedented reaction to a pandemic that was contrary to all their pandemic plans and even the WHO's pandemic plans from October 2019. Jerry and I agree, and I'm glad to hear him say this, that the closure of schools was a mistake, I would say, and a deplorable mistake. And that was a contribution
But
to
it was a
So
mistake
why Jerry and
that
I
happened
agree
in
is that
part
that is
because of the way that Sage operated. But look, I'm glad that we end on a note of agreement. Thank you so much to public law barrister. Sorry, we're going to have to go now, Jerry, but public law barrister and legal commentator Francis Hoare and the former Tory MP and criminal barrister Jerry Hayes. So who do you agree with? Should COVID officials like Whitty and Vallance face criminal investigation? Carl on Twitter says if Whitty and Vallance believe they can fully justify their actions, surely they will welcome any and all scrutiny. That's my point. I'm just saying, let's investigate. Let's find out, given what Sunak has said. From Elliot, weren't they more in the position of giving advice than making the rules? If we are going to assign blame with hindsight, always a terrible idea, let's at least aim at the politicians who made the decisions. And from Kojak on email, every MP, scientist, journalist and COVID fanatic who supported the tyrannical lockdown and restrictions should be ashamed of themselves. They violated our fundamental and inalienable freedoms and liberties. And your verdict is now in. 68% of you agree with Francis Hoare that COVID officials should face criminal investigation for possible misconduct in public office. 32% of you with Jerry Hayes and say they shouldn't. Coming up, as Nelson Mandela's grandson blasts Meghan Markle for comparing her wedding to the civil rights hero's own liberation, can Prince Harry be saved from the monster of Montecito? Star US journalist Megyn Kelly takes on her narcissistic namesake at 9:45. But first, as Albanian people smuggling gangs exploit the UK's soft border with Ireland, when will we deliver on Brexit and take back control of our borders? Nigel Farage has been on this massive story from the start. He gives his unmissable take live in just 2 minutes' time.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Breaking tonight, Russian state media is reporting that the former president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has died aged 91. The last leader of the Soviet Union, he presided over the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the breakup of the communist bloc 2 years later, heralding the end of the Cold War. Nigel Farage joins me now to react. Nigel, we're pretty certain this news is true. It has been reported by multiple Russian news agencies tonight, including Interfax. What will Gorbachev's legacy be?
Well, Mikhail Gorbachev, the man who Margaret Thatcher said, he's a man I can do business with. Remember perestroika, the opening up of the Soviet Union, kind of paving the way for the visa changes that led directly to the fall of the Berlin Wall. So I think for us in the West, he's something of a hero. I mean, Ronald Reagan, for example, well after Ronnie had retired and Gorbachev had retired, and Gorbachev would go and visit him at his ranch in California. So a remarkable man who, oversaw those last days of what was, frankly, truly an evil empire. And here's the irony, Dan. He then finished up a very isolated figure within Russia itself, without much popularity. And it just goes to show, sometimes the real heroes in history do not get the credit they deserved. And to me, Mikhail Gorbachev falls firmly into that camp.
Tom Tugendhat, a potential future cabinet minister in the Truss administration, has just tweeted on this, Nigel. Mikhail Gorbachev's reported dead, according to Moscow's Central Clinical Hospital, is a reminder of how far Russia has fallen from a powerful, if tyrannical state, to now the playpen of gangsters and war criminals. Is that fair?
Well, look, I think that actually the early 90s were a period of great optimism that a new Russia, and with its new satellite states breaking away, would become a place of democracy, would become a place that we'd recognise. So I understand Tugendhat saying how corrupted Russia has become. I get that. But to think that it's just a little backyard that's irrelevant underestimates the potential power, damage and danger that Putin could do. And isn't it funny? We were really patting ourselves on the back 6 months ago. We've put tough sanctions on Putin. They're really going to suffer. Well, ask yourself, with the price of gas, who's now really paying the price?
Now, you refer to Gorbachev and Thatcher. Here's what she had to say about him, Nigel.
I like Mr. Gorbachev. We can do business together. We both believe in our own political systems. He firmly believes in his, I firmly believe in mine. We're never going to change one another. So that is not in doubt. But we have two great interests in common, that we should both do everything we can to see that war never starts again, and therefore we go into the disarmament talks determined to make them succeed. And secondly, I think we both believe that they're the more likely to succeed if we can build up confidence in one another and trust in one another about each other's approach.
Nigel, of course, things have changed so much since that time. Where do you think our relations with Russia are going to go?
Dan, I'm minded to say our political leaders have changed so much. There was a woman, whether you agreed with her or disagreed with her, who was firm in her convictions, well thought through in her beliefs, her ideology, her philosophy, and compare that to the careerists. We're about to get our fourth Conservative Prime Minister in 6 years. No, as I said earlier, Thatcher recognised, whilst there were huge cultural differences, Gorbachev was a man she could do business with. And I just felt, that day, I was actually in Germany the day the Berlin Wall came down. Purely by coincidence, but I was there. And it was a remarkable time, a time of great hope, a time of great optimism. And it's very sad to see what Russia has become today.
No, it is. It absolutely is, Nigel. How do you think this news will go down in Russia, where obviously Putin has a constant battle, actually, to keep the Russians on side? Really interesting, Nigel. I've been looking at the statistics over the past few weeks, and many Russians are starting to tune out of the state propaganda when it comes to the war in Ukraine. So this is going to be a very interesting moment for Putin, isn't it? Because it's a reminder to the Russian citizens of how much has changed because of his decision to invade Ukraine.
Yes, I think to modern-day Russians looking back at it, they'll say, wow, look at the character, look at the behaviour of Gorbachev compared to the way Putin behaves and acts today. But of course, to the real hardcore Putinites, they actually dislike Gorbachev and Gorbachev's legacy, because many of them actually hanker to see the old Soviet Union back again, and I suspect actually Vladimir Putin is one of them. Now, as I said earlier, he had become a devalued figure in his own country, despite his extraordinary efforts to open Russia up and to end that evil communist system. History is full of this. Very often the prizes, the honours and the statues go to the wrong people.
No, indeed, although a lot of people do also blame Gorbachev for the Yeltsin years too, where Russia went through a lot of struggles. So I guess it is a mixed legacy in some ways.
Yes, of course. And, look, it's rather like Brexit, isn't it? Brexit gives us the right to govern ourselves. It doesn't guarantee the fact we're going to be governed well. And Yeltsin, of course, turned out to be, well, a bit of a drunk, frankly, and something of an embarrassment. But it was at least the beginnings of a post-communist era, and the hope and belief that we all had that Russia could become a modern, functioning democracy. And it just hasn't happened.
I have to say, Nigel, it is quite incredible, isn't it, to think he lived into his 90s, given that his health wasn't always the best, was it?
No, it wasn't. He wasn't a particularly robust character in that sense. No, he's gone on and lived a very long, full life. I mean, I can only guess that in the last 6 months he would have been dismayed to see Russia cast out, very much to the outer edges of, Western civilization, and Gorbachev, I won't say that he embraced it, but he opened Russia up to having an understanding with it, and to see Russia driven into the arms of the Chinese Communist Party must have been a pretty depressing thing for him. He also did say at a private dinner in the late 1990s, he said, "I can't understand why you as the United Kingdom, having been so against the concept of the Soviet Union, are immersing yourselves more deeply in the European Union." So he did have a good understanding of geopolitics as well.
No, indeed. And I guess just finally, Nigel, there was a lighter side to Gorbachev as well. I remember the famous Pizza Hut commercial because, of course, he was the man who opened Russia up to those very capitalist Western countries. And again, Nigel, just a final word, because there's an irony, isn't there? We look at Gorbachev, a Russian leader who was so keen for capitalism, he would even star in a Pizza Hut commercial. Then you have Putin, the man who has driven McDonald's and many of those major Western businesses out of Russia. It's a stark contrast, and it's a contrast that is going to impact the world.
Yes, absolutely. And, he was an extraordinary figure. And I think you'll find that across the West, in our country and everywhere else, there will be full-page glowing obituaries to an extraordinary man who wanted to modernize Russia, who realized that the Soviet Union as it was out of date, defunct, didn't work. And he wanted Russia, frankly, to become just a little bit more Western. And truth of it is, after the last 6 months, it's become isolated from the West. That is not going to heal for many, many years to come. And I guess the biggest concern I now have is that Russia will be teamed up with the modern day form of horrible, barbarous communism that is represented by China. So, some great successes in many, many ways for Gorbachev's life and career, but the Russia that he wanted isn't happening.
Nigel Farage, a perfect take on the complicated legacy of Mikhail Gorbachev, who has died at 91. It has been announced in the last few minutes after a, quote, long and serious illness. Nigel Farage, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, as health officials backtrack by saying there's no evidence that the COVID vaccine is safe for pregnant women, did the government make a huge mistake by pushing the jab without medical proof it would do no harm? That potentially monumental scandal is our big debate in the Media Buzz at 10. But first, Meghan Markle has sparked outrage from Nelson Mandela's family and across the globe after she astonishingly compared her wedding to the civil rights hero's release from prison. Star US journalist Megyn Kelly joins me live next to give the stateside reaction to the Montecito diva's latest unhinged interview. That's right, it's Meghan on Meghan, straight after the break.
Join my show, Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Breaking tonight, Russian state media is reporting that the former president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has died aged 91 after a long and serious illness. That's according to the Central Clinical Hospital in Moscow. Of course, we played that famous Margaret Thatcher moment speaking about Gorbachev. Here's, of course, the message that Ronald Reagan, the US president, sent him in 1987.
There is one sign that the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Megyn Kelly, wow, 1987, years of great hope in terms of the relationship between the Soviet Union and the rest of the world. What do you think is Mikhail Gorbachev's legacy?
You know, Dan, first, you can't look at that moment without getting the chills, knowing how it would end. And as an American, I look at it and think, my God, I miss that kind of leadership over here. You know, Barack Obama came into office and telegraphed weakness. He went on an apology tour around the world for America. Meanwhile, Americans were over here saying, what are you apologizing for? Don't apologize on behalf of our country. We now have a president who can't string two words together. Trump was a strong man, but didn't understand diplomacy, you know, in terms of handling our allies in a way where they would, our friends, in a way that they would want to work with us. So it's been a long time since we've had a leader like Reagan, and he was the perfect man for the perfect time against a guy like Gorbachev. I mean, the friendship that they formed is really one of the key reasons why the Cold War ended. You know, it was a series of 40 letters between President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev where they became actual friends after Reagan had called them the evil empire. And then they got to know each other, and it was private. It wasn't for the cameras, and it wasn't on Instagram. It was a behind-the-scenes attempt to actually forge a relationship, and they did become friends. And Reagan was later asked many years later, do you still consider them the evil empire? And he said, absolutely not. No, it's a different time. And I think it's just a story of humanity and how, despite nuclear weapons and media and previous rulers who wanted very different results, two men tapping into their humanity and the understanding of what could happen if their worst natures prevailed, found their best natures and set the world on a different course. I mean, I understand the position we're in right now with Russia and Ukraine and so on, but you can't dismiss the progress that was made by Gorbachev and Reagan in those years.
It's going to be fascinating to watch, Megyn, how the death of Gorbachev is greeted by the Russian people, because, of course, Putin has been very successful with his propaganda thus far, but it does seem to be faltering a little bit, according to the statistics that I've looked to, showing that Russians are increasingly switching off the Ukraine war propaganda. Do you think the death of Gorbachev is going to be a really bittersweet moment for Russians? Because, of course, as I mentioned before the break, you've got Gorbachev, he was the great Western hero who even starred in that Pizza Hut ad, and all of a sudden you've got Putin, who is breaking Russia off from the rest of the world.
I maybe with some old timers, but I do think, I've been to Russia quite a few times over the past few years and interviewed Putin quite a few times as well. And I do think even now, the Russian people love Vladimir Putin. And they don't love him for himself necessarily. They love him because he stands up for Mother Russia. And he doesn't let Russia get bullied in their eyes. And they love a strong man. They do not like weak men over in Russia. And so, I'll just give you one small example. When I was over there getting ready to interview Putin, his right-hand man looked at me and I said, I've got some very, very, very tough questions for him. And his right-hand man said to me, a fiery Putin is a good Putin. And what he was trying to say is the Russian people love a fiery Putin. They love him at his strongest and, not angriest, but just most robust. And so the Russians don't look at him the way we do. And it's tough to sort of look at the way we see Putin and transfer that onto the Russian people. They admire him. They think he's restored the strength of Mother Russia, and they're more likely to give him the benefit of the doubt on some of his messaging than certainly any of the Western media is. It's not to say nothing creeps through, but their access to the free internet is much more limited than we would like and that we're familiar with. And they've had a lifetime of indoctrination into believing, in particular on Vladimir Putin, that he knows best, that he loves the country, and that he'll do right by Russia. So I don't know that. I'm sure they'll pay homage to their former leader, but I don't think it'll change the way they see their current one.
Megyn Kelly, thank you so much, Megyn. Reacting, of course, to the breaking news tonight that the last president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, is dead at the age of 91. Megyn, thank you so much.
Oh, Bastian.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Boris refuses to rule out a political comeback.
What's your plan after next Tuesday? I'm concentrating on today. Will you rule out a comeback at all? What I want to talk to you about. I think, on the whole, people in this country are more interested in their gigabit broadband.
Is his likely successor Liz Truss right to ignore the Green Lobby and help strengthen Britain's energy security by drilling for North Sea oil? And would a 25% discount on energy bills to communities that support fracking secure nationwide support to drill for that liquid gold? I'll debate that with my superstar panel at 10:30 tonight. I'm joined by former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robertson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. The great backtrack continues as the government's health regulator now says there's no evidence proving the COVID vaccine is actually safe for pregnant women. So was incessantly pushing the jab without medical proof of its safety actually the biggest act of negligence since World War II? Well, that brewing scandal is our big debate in the media buzz next. After 200 arrests, 7 stabbings and 1 tragic death, Sadiq Khan has the gall to describe the shocking scenes at the Notting Hill Carnival as immaculate. So, has lawless London's failed mayor got blood on his hands over the state of his city? BBC TV star Shabs Ahmad made headlines for calling out Khan's warped priorities, and he joins me live in the studio at 10:15. After upsetting Nelson Mandela's grandson by suggesting South Africans celebrated her wedding the same way they rejoiced Madiba's freedom, the tone-deaf Duchess Meghan Markle has struck again with yet more attention-seeking drivel.
If there's any time in my life that it's been more focused on my race, it's only once I started dating my husband.
We'll pick apart the latest episode of her Woe Is Me podcast shortly, where Mariah Carey actually hilariously branded Meghan a diva. Well, I guess she would know.
Are the elites waging a war on masculinity to make us easier to control? Author and content creator Layla Halpern says the threat of tyranny is strengthened by our weakness. She's uncancelled on that at 10:40. And tomorrow's front pages are on the way too. We'll see if any of them include the breaking news of the death of Mikhail Gorbachev that we've been covering for the past 20 minutes. And of course, a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass revealed at 10:50. But first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. And some detail on that breaking news you've been hearing within the last hour. The final leader of the former Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has died at the age of 91. That's according to Russian state media. Perhaps most famous for supporting glasnost or free speech, he also presided over the reunification of Germany after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, as well as the breakup of the communist bloc itself 2 years later, being widely praised for his pivotal role in ending the Cold War. It's understood he died in hospital in Moscow after a long illness. Well, news here at home, and a huge amount has been promised to help with the energy crisis, with the Prime Minister saying his successor will provide further support for households who are struggling. During a visit to Dorset today, Boris Johnson said announcements will be made this week on energy security, including on nuclear power. Admitting the country faces tough months ahead, he said the package of measures should offer a sense of hope and perspective.
What we've got to do is get through the tough months ahead. I'm not going to, shrink from this. It is going to be tough in the months to come. It's going to be tough through to next year. People do care about this. They want to know that we're going to have the long-term British energy security strategy, and we are. We're putting in more nuclear, and you're going to be hearing more about that later this week. And we're putting in absolutely shed loads of wind power as well.
Now, an inquest into the murder of little Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool has told how a police officer tried to save her life by using his hand to cover her gunshot wound as he carried her into hospital. The 9-year-old girl died after being attacked by a gunman who had chased another man into her home just over a week ago. Despite medics' efforts, they were unable to save her. A post-mortem examination has found the cause of her death was a single gunshot wound to her chest. And the Metropolitan Police has launched a murder investigation and an appeal asking anyone who may have a photograph or video footage to help them in their investigation into the murder of a 21-year-old man at the Notting Hill Carnival over the bank holiday weekend. 7 people were stabbed at the event yesterday, including Bristol rapper Takayo Nemhard, who was killed in the Ladbroke Grove area. The Met Police made over 200 arrests at the event, including 33 for possession of an offensive weapon. Pothole repair costs have soared as a result of the war in Ukraine. Around 60% of materials used to repair roads in the UK was sourced from Russia before the invasion. Councils say they now have to ration bitumen and find it from other markets, which is pushing up costs and delaying repairs. The latest estimates suggest it'll take local authorities 10 years and £12 billion to bring all surfaces up to scratch. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News Tonight, where it's time for Dan Wootton Tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our media buzz. Just one front page in. I'm sure many will be trying to react to the breaking news tonight that Mikhail Gorbachev has died. But we've got the Eye so far that reports on small firms pleading with Liz Truss, as staff have already been sacked in some companies. As Boris Johnson begins his farewell tour of the UK, he attempts to highlight his achievements. My superstar panel back with me now, former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robertson, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. Now, COVID vaccine pushers have long insisted the jab's a, quote, safe and effective for almost everybody of every age. But the government was forced to try and clarify an alleged serious contradiction in its own advice today when it came to the safety of the Pfizer vaccine for pregnant women.
A recently updated page on the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency website, the government department that approves vaccines, sparked concern by telling readers sufficient reassurance of safe use in the vaccine in pregnant women cannot be provided at the present time. It went on, women who are breastfeeding should also not be vaccinated. These judgments reflect the absence of data at the present time. Now, that warning clearly contradicts advice given by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, the NHS, and even then Pandemic Health Secretary Sajid Javid, who all urged pregnant women to rush out and get vaccinated. So when quizzed today, the MHRA told us that the warning on its public assessment report page reflected data from Pfizer when the vaccine was rolled out in December 2020, and it wasn't recently added in the August update of the report. But nearly 2 years on, the MHRA still doesn't have pregnancy safety data direct from Pfizer that it's able to update its public assessment report page with. Instead, the MHRA declares the Pfizer jab safe for pregnant women based off the UK's own data from the vaccine rollout and reports from its yellow card scheme of vaccine side effects. The question begs, if Pfizer had no clue about the vaccine's effect on pregnant women, and neither did the government, why did the health establishment immediately push it on pregnant healthcare workers and vulnerable mums-to-be when the jab was approved in December 2020 before any real-world data was available, and then just 16 weeks later to everyone else? Calvin Robinson, you think this is a potential scandal?
I think this is possibly the biggest case of criminal negligence in living history. I think it's abhorrent, it's wicked, the way that this vaccine was pushed on mothers before there was any real data about whether it's safe or not, safe or effective. I can't think of anything worse in my lifetime. And the new advice, not the new advice, the advice from the JCVI is directly contradicting what the NHS was pushing at the time. And even worse than that, the Pfizer data set shows that a high percentage of women that took the vaccine who were pregnant suffered miscarriages. And the number around it is being verified still, but Reuters and the FDA, who are both at the forefront of these fact-checking websites, could not verify or deny the percentage, and neither could Pfizer. So it seems to me that this is an unsafe vaccine for mothers to take.
Rebecca, you strongly disagree.
I don't know if I strongly disagree. What I found really interesting when I was pregnant, because I got pregnant sort of mid-COVID, was that the advice from midwives was really mixed. Some midwives would say you definitely should, it's really important, and some would say I personally wouldn't because I haven't seen long enough. The difficulty is it's not possible to do any kind of ethical test on whether something's safe for pregnant women. So, for instance, we have no idea what the safe level of alcohol for pregnant women is because you cannot do a controlled test on it. So this is all based on roughly anecdotal evidence, and also it's complicated by the fact that 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in miscarriage anyway, so it's difficult, but then that is very skewed by how old you are, how healthy you are, what your body weight is, whether you smoke. So there are so many variables in pregnancy. I didn't personally get vaccinated in pregnancy because I had previously lost a baby and I was very, very hyper-vigilant about anything I put in my body. And I thought, given that I couldn't take ibuprofen, I didn't necessarily want to take anything. However, of the 20 women I know from my antenatal group to have babies at the same time as I did, the other 19 all did get vaccinated and all of their babies were born fine. So I think it's a very, very complicated thing to say. And basically, the science is not there because we do not do tests on pregnant women.
But Dawn, isn't the issue about the British public having availability of full information? And we've learned from Rishi Sunak's revelations over the past week that Sage purposefully went out of their way to actually hide information in certain cases from the British public. And I think a lot of pregnant women, if they had been told by the government, the MHRA conclusion that sufficient reassurance of safe use of the vaccine in pregnant women cannot be provided at the present time, would have made a different decision. Because, of course, they weren't hearing that from the MHRA. Now, the MHRA say this has always been our advice, and it's just going viral now because they've actually refreshed their webpage. But the point is that isn't what pregnant people were hearing. They were being...
Pregnant people, Dan.
...really pushed.
Pregnant, very well done. Oh, my gosh.
Well done.
One of us.
That certainly wasn't
pregnant. The thing is, one of the pregnant women pushing this message at the time was one Carrie Johnson. She boasted quite vociferously and publicly that she had had her vaccine and she was fine and she was healthy while she was pregnant. However, the government's own advice leaflet at the time said that vaccine in pregnancy should only be considered when potential benefits outweigh the risks for mum and baby. So the government advice was officially as Rebecca said, be wary about the vaccine.
But how can you weigh up the risks and the benefits if you don't have informed consent?
So I think the major concern was that if you catch COVID in the later stage of pregnancy, your lungs are enormously compressed. And I remember that from when I was pregnant. It's very hard to breathe anyway. So if you get COVID and you are heavily pregnant, then you could die. Yeah. Or they could have to deliver the baby very early and then the baby could die. So I can see why it would be sensible to get it.
Yes.
I just think there wasn't enough information. And they changed it.
But Dawn, that official information was not the information being pushed. I mean, I literally remember mums pregnant women being emotionally blackmailed because they were being told the people who are dying, people who are ending up in intensive care with COVID are largely pregnant
I felt
women.
very shamed for not doing it. I really did.
The issue is not just with pregnant women, but because that was an official leaflet handed out to pregnant women at the time. But the issue is that our government, people we elected and paid for, deliberately went out of their way to shame and terrorise an already pretty anxious population. Not just pregnant women, all of us, Dan. All of us are made feel guilty and ashamed if we didn't do our bit and get that vaccine. And the terror tactics that went with it, I will never forgive the government for.
No.
I really won't.
No, because the point is that MHRA official government information was actually what folk like Sajid Javid and Valence and Whitty should have been reading at the government press conference.
The Moderna one was much more widely regarded to be the right thing to get in pregnancy. And some people did say, if you're going to get it, get the Moderna one, not the Pfizer one.
The language of terror.
But again, you didn't actually have a choice.
Well, you could go and look for it.
Well, you could go and look for it.
Which is what I would have done.
But again, we weren't like the US, where people were offered the smorgasbord of the vaccine and you got to choose
because we didn't pay for it.
No, indeed.
No.
Indeed.
Well, we did.
We did indirectly. Now, Nelson Mandela's family have slammed Meghan Markle for suggesting South Africans celebrated her wedding to Prince Harry the same way they rejoiced Madiba's freedom from prison. And you'd think after that sort of backlash, you'd want to lay low for a while. But as we all know, the Meghan publicity train never rests. Just 24 hours after that tone-deaf interview with The Cut magazine, the Duchess of Woke released the second instalment of her pitiful podcast with special guest Mariah Carey. It was always going to be hard for the Duchess of Woke to find a bigger diva than herself to sit down with, but she managed it. And the pop megastar definitely knows a fellow prima donna when she sees one.
And yes, the diva thing we can play into. I mean, it's not something that I connect to, but for you, it's been a huge part of your...
give us diva moments sometimes, Megyn.
What kind of diva moments do I give you?
Don't act like you. It's also the visual. It's the visual. A lot of it's the visual. Because
see, that's the thing. I associate it differently. It was all going swimmingly. I mean, really well. Until that moment happened, which I don't know about you, but it stopped me in my tracks. When she called me a diva. You couldn't see me, obviously, but I started to sweat a little bit. I started squirming in my chair in this quiet revolt. Like, wait, what? No, what? Huh? But that, how could you? That's not true. That's not. Why would you say that? My mind genuinely was just spinning with what nonsense she must have read or clicked on to make her say that.
No, Megyn. She knows a diva when she sees one. I mean, Dawn, she's a diva, right?
Well, that's one of the politer things you could possibly say about her at the moment, to be honest.
She's afraid that she doesn't have control over her image there. That's what it is. Someone has recognised her for what she is and she doesn't want that to get out there.
And what I loved, Rebecca, because I did, for work purposes, because I have to listen to the full thing today, it was very grim. And Megyn then goes on to say, oh, but actually, Mariah wasn't saying I was a diva. She was just saying I looked like a diva and I look really beautiful and graceful. I mean, why is she doing this? Does she not understand that this is actually making her look worse?
What I think is sad is if you have a podcast that's aimed at like deconstructing negative archetypes around women and stereotyping around women, surely you should reclaim the word and be like, yeah, I can be a diva. I'm very direct. I know what I want. Rather than being like, me, me, a diva? No, never.
And plus, isn't this about Mariah Carey talking and being interviewed on a podcast?
No, it's all about
her.
her.
Of course not.
Also, do you think Lilibet's going to be upset that it's called the Archwell Foundation, the podcast called Archwell? Where's the Lilibet merch?
But look, of course, Meghan couldn't resist having another jab at the royal family either.
If there's any time in my life that it's been more focused on my race, it's only once I started dating my husband. Then I started to understand what it was like to be treated like a black woman, because up until then I had been treated like a mixed woman. And things really shifted.
Oh, is she black now?
Come on, the only person who brings all the focus on race is herself, Coven. None of us were talking about Meghan Markle's race.
Did she just say she's now black? Not since she married Prince Harry. I don't know. How does it work?
She's trying to claim that we were the ones who were obsessed with her race. And I actually don't believe that. I think we were just very happy that Prince Harry had found a nice woman. And remember, in her early days, in her acting career, Meghan used to describe herself as white
Caucasian.
when she was applying for
It's the victimhood mentality. She's using the race card because she's seen that we don't like her as a person. And she's saying, it can't be me, it must be, it's my skin colour they don't like.
So marrying a ginger bloke made her be
her more black.
Yeah, more black, and like Nelson Mandela. I married a ginger bloke. What does that make me?
I mean, Rebecca, that Nelson Mandela comparison, even you on the woke side of things must have thought, just stop.
It becomes harder and harder and harder to defend her.
That's for sure. Rebecca Reid, Gun Ronson, Dawn Neeson, do stand by, because coming up is Boris Johnson's likely successor Liz Truss' right to ignore the Green lobby and help strengthen Britain's energy security by drilling for North Sea oil, and would a 25% discount on energy bills to communities that support fracking secure nationwide support to drill for liquid gold? I think at the moment it probably would. My Superstar panel will return to debate that in the next Media Buzz at 10:30. But first, are the elites waging war on masculinity to make us easier to control? Author and social media sensation Layla Halpern says the threat of tyranny is strengthened by our weakness. She's going to reveal all straight after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. More of tomorrow's newspaper front pages coming up. We'll see if they cover the death of Mikhail Gorbachev, which we revealed in the last hour. But first, the male fertility crisis has been getting worse since the 1970s, with lifestyle factors, including diet, even environmental changes, blamed for plummeting sperm counts. But my next guest recently went viral for her bombshell claims that the wider decline of empowered men is down to an intentional war on masculinity. Cultural commentator and social media sensation Layla Halpern says men are being deliberately targeted by governments and the corporate establishment to be, quote, weak, fat and compliant in a bid to wrestle more authoritarian control over society. Watch.
I think there's a massive war on masculinity right now. The government, this system, they want you weak. They want men in particular to be weak, fat and compliant so that they can't fight the tyranny. Because when you're weak, fat and compliant, addicted to porn and unable to get outside your house and actually be aware of what's going on in the world, then the powers that be have more control. When men are strong, when men are intelligent, when men are entrepreneurs, when men are hitting the gym, that is not good for those who are in charge.
Now, Leia joins the likes of Jordan Peterson, calling for men to take responsibility for their lives and channel their inner alpha male, despite facing a barrage of modern-day challenges such as porn and idleness. I'm delighted to say Leia joins me now. So, Leia, when did this war on masculinity start? And what can real men, ordinary men, do to fight back, do you think?
Firstly, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to talk about this with you. It's been going on for decades. It's the feminization of men. They don't want men to be strong. They don't want men to be powerful. We keep hearing strong women, but we never hear about strong men. What we hear about is toxic masculinity. And I agree with Jordan Peterson. I think the term toxic masculinity is so dangerous. It's so insulting. What are young boys supposed to hear when they hear the term toxic masculinity? There's no empowerment about how to be a man, how to be a better individual. A lot of traits that young boys have, whether it's competition, aggression, nobody's teaching these kids, these young boys, how to nurture that and how to direct that in a healthy way. Instead, we have these fem-centric systems whereby, you know, we have more female teachers and fem-centric systems overall, which are basically telling these young boys that that's bad. How dare you be competitive? How dare you be aggressive? But actually, as Jordan Peterson says, I think as a man, you need to be a monster, but in a good way, in a way whereby you're channeling that in a healthy way. So like you do, and like many of other GB News presenters do, when they spot the tyranny, when they spot not informed consent when it comes to pregnant women being told to take vaccines, they stand up and they say, hang on, that isn't correct. This is what I mean. Channeling that competition, that anger, that focus, rather than being feminized and told to be a bit more compliant.
Because presumably, Leia, feminized men are much easier to lock down, much easier to told that they can't drive a car, that they can't eat meat anymore, that they can't go on a family holiday, which is what the globalists want ordinary folk to sign up to.
Absolutely. I mean, the war on meat is an incredible example where they're trying to make us eat bugs. Why? Because meat literally makes you big and strong. What happens when you're physically big and strong? Mentally, you feel better. You're able to think critically. You're able to be mentally resilient when they tell you that you can't travel unless you take some kind of medicine. When you're strong, you're able to resist that better. And, you know, even the whole narrative when it comes to the gym bros, you know, they say guys that go to the gym, there are so many media headlines like The Guardian that say men that hit the gym, they call them right-wing, alt-right. No, they're not. I know plenty of incredible men that go to the gym and are very kind, very charitable, very entrepreneurial. You know, Elon Musk as well, I think, is a fantastic example of this because he's somebody who's incredibly entrepreneurial. He's totally left the matrix, if you like. He's built numerous businesses. He has multiple women, multiple children, and the system hates him. In America, they absolutely hate him, and he has paid the most taxes that any person has ever paid, and yet they still hate Elon Musk. Why? Because he's showing you that you don't have to do the 9 to 5. He's pulling people. Well, he's an inspiration. He's an inspiration that, you know, you don't have to be part of the matrix.
And so it's really important, isn't it, Leia, that men should no longer feel guilty for embracing a more traditional role?
Absolutely. It actually breaks my heart to see men feel guilty about wanting to hold the door for a woman, wanting to pay for a woman, you know, wanting to protect and provide for her. I think as well, a lot of the issues with these, there's a lot of gender dynamic issues right now, and it's because men don't want to insult women by helping her. God forbid you mansplain to her. It's okay. You're, as a woman, yes, you're allowed to teach me something. I'm going to listen, and that's okay. I'm not going to shout at you. And so because we have less, let's say, masculine men, the women become more masculine in order to fill that void. And I think it really breaks down the relationships between men and women. Men want feminine women, women want masculine men. And when you don't have those dynamics in harmony, we're starting to sort of cross, and we end up having some kind of gender neutral situation.
Oh, yeah.
And I 100% think that that is a World Economic Forum agenda. 100%, because like I said in that video, it's the men that go to war, it's the men that fight the tyranny. And I actually just tweeted this. If you have a society of weak women, okay, fine. But if you have a society of weak men, we are in trouble, and that is catastrophic.
No, I think you're completely right about the World Economic Forum. It's so fascinating, isn't it, that the MSM talk all the time about the term toxic masculinity, but they never speak of some of the consequences of toxic feminism, which, for example, is trying to erase female sport. I mean, come on, if you're going to talk about toxic masculinity, you've got to look at the other side of the coin too.
Absolutely. I mean, feminism has gone way too far. Like, I believe in individual empowerment. As a woman, I have a career because I know I need to be financially secure, but that is it. That is where my feminism starts and ends, because feminism has gone way too far. Absolutely. They're trying to erase what it means to be a woman. As a woman, that insults me. I'm offended. I'm not a cis woman. I'm just a woman. And if they can choose their labels, don't pick my labels, you know? And so absolutely, toxic femininity has gone way too far. They don't talk about that because we live in a matriarchy, in my opinion, not a patriarchy anymore. And so it's gone way too far, and God forbid we actually were rude to women. That would be very offensive.
You're absolutely brilliant. I think there will be a lot of men and women at home punching the air saying, hell yes, Layla Halpern. Of course, a brilliant social commentator, financial author and social media sensation too. Hope to speak soon, Leia.
Thanks.
But coming up in Uncancelled, 200 arrests, 7 stabbings and a tragic death at an out-of-control Notting Hill carnival. But it still wasn't enough to wake Sadiq Khan up to the sorry state of his lawless London. So has the failed mayor got blood on his hands over the crime plaguing his city? BBC TV star Shabs Ahmad delivers some home truths for Khan live in the studio soon. But up first in the Media Buzz, our superstar panel will discuss whether Boris Johnson's likely successor Liz Truss is right to ignore the Green Lobby and help strengthen Britain's energy security by drilling for North Sea oil. We're also going to hear their views on whether there should be a 25% discount on all energy bills for any community that supports fracking. You know what I say, frack, frack, frack. We'll do it after the break.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news site now in our media buzz. More front pages are in. And of course, Mikhail Gorbachev, who has died tonight, aged 91, features on some of them. Late changes here. But The Guardian, as its lead story, warns of hunger fears as food banks say that stocks may run out due to a, quote, completely unsustainable surge in demand amidst the cost of lockdown crisis. The Daily Telegraph leads with Priti Patel telling the so-called woke police to get back to basics and focus on traditional policing, as a report finds the public feel officers are distracted from solving crimes by woke issues. No kidding. Of course, if you missed it, my digest at the start of the show was about this very issue. You can find it on social media. And they say Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union between 1985 and 1991, has died in a Moscow hospital aged 91. Farewell, I'm proud of the things we did. That's on the front page of tomorrow's Daily Express in reference to Boris Johnson's twilight days as Prime Minister. It comes as he urges the new PM to, quote, grab the torch and run with it. She's the Duchess of Delusion, say the Sun. They're right, aren't they? The paper reports on the backlash Meghan is facing by Nelson Mandela's grandson over her claims she had been compared to the anti-apartheid hero, with Mandela calling her comments shameful. And as he said, overcoming 60 years of apartheid is not the same as marrying a white prince. We're on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel. Former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. With less than a week to go in the Tory leadership race, it's clear our next Prime Minister's top priority will be getting on top of Britain's existential energy crisis. Economists from the investment bank Goldman Sachs have today warned that inflation in the UK could exceed 22% next year if spiralling gas prices are not brought under control. So what's stopping Britain from oil drilling our way out of this crisis? The answer is, of course, the eco-zealot groups, just like crippling our country. But frontrunner for PM Liz Truss could be onto a winning strategy, both for our energy security, keep cold and poverty at bay, by promising to issue drilling licenses that would enable energy companies to extract the 15 billion barrels of oil needed from under the North Sea. Both Truss and Sunak have also indicated that they'll lift the ban on fracking in areas where plans are supported by local communities. Well, energy firms are clearly listening as they're preparing to offer households a 25% cut in their energy bills if they back fracking sites in their area. These developments come as defender of free speech Elon Musk has said civilization will crumble without oil and gas, and warns that proper green energy sources will take a decade to build, which is what I've actually been saying for months. We'll get there, but let's not just rush this. So look, Dawn, I think lots of positive steps here. Can we touch on this fracking thing first? Because actually, for a long time, it's felt like no local community will ever say yes for fracking. Actually, all of a sudden, if you start saying 25% off your astronomical power bills, I would say make it 50%, make it 75%, because we have to get fracking, and we've got to get fracking fast.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I mean, sort of like the 25% off could be, over £800 off of your energy bill. I mean, who wouldn't say yes to that? It makes perfect sense. I mean, look, it's not going to affect me because I live in the centre of London, so they're not going to start fracking under the Houses of Parliament, are they? But I would do this, I think, if I lived in a rural area.
And you say just ignore the Green lobby now? They just have to be ignored?
Look, this is the problem with what they want, as you quite rightly said. What they want is impossible. They're undermining their own thing because they're screeching about fuel poverty at the same time as doing everything they can to push up fuel prices. So it doesn't make any sense what they're doing. What they're demanding is sort of like net zero by next week, which is impossible. We can't do it. We have to do things, but do them at a sensible pace. Surely.
And Calvin, energy independence, I think, has to be an immediate priority for the next Prime Minister. And I'm talking about short-term energy independence, I'm talking about medium-term energy independence, I'm talking about long-term energy independence. So there is a hell of a lot that needs to be done because we have been left in this perilous situation by administration after administration. The next Prime Minister cannot make the same mistake.
No, it's been short-termism on the part of these politicians. We need to become self-sufficient. We've got to start fracking for natural gas, we've got to dig for coal, and we've got to build nuclear. And I think if this plan defeats NIMBYism and encourages people to let them do this in their area, that's fantastic, because a 25% discount is even better than nothing. I mean,
I think it needs to be higher. I think it should be higher.
Well, Richard Tice suggested 50%, and I think that's fantastic. But 25% is better than nothing. When your bills are this big, it makes a big difference. But in terms of renewables, it's a big scam. It's a big money-making scam. Renewables cannot replace gas and oil and other forms of natural energy at this point.
Not yet. And that's, I thought, what was so smart.
There's nothing wrong with gas. Gas is a very clean source of fuel. There is no issue with gas.
But Rebecca, why are you not saying frack, frack, frack?
Because when I was very young and very poor, I worked as a temp in a lobbyist company, and my job was ringing people who had had fracking trials done on their land and saying, so that fracking trial, that went well, should we carry on? And every single one said it was unbearable. The house you couldn't live in the house when it was happening. Everything was shaking. It was deafeningly loud. So what will happen is people will sign up to it because they want this fairly small discount and will realise that it is genuinely not something that you can have happening by your house and still live there. It's an unbearable situation. That's the only issue with fracking as far as I'm concerned.
Calvin?
I just think if we don't do this, people are going to be in poverty that we've not known for a long, long time, in a matter of weeks, actually. So we've got to start doing something. We've got to do it now. We can't keep waiting and waiting, and that's what the governments have been doing for the last 2 decades.
I think the other frustrating thing is that this is going 25% off on energy bills for people who live in frackable communities. Generally speaking, you have more money in rural communities where fracking would happen, and poverty tends to be centred around urban centres. So I can't say, OK, sure, not that I'm living in poverty, I can't say, yeah, sure, frack under my Balham house in order to get 25% off my bills.
The big
it doesn't
picture
really
is going to
work.
affect everyone's bills, isn't it? It's going to help everyone if we've got more natural gas in our own country.
But that probably fracking is not a silver bullet. It would still be probably 5 years.
But it's not a silver bullet.
Absolutely.
It's not a silver bullet. And the point is, none of these individual energy sources is a silver bullet. Unfortunately, idiots like that complete fool who used to be our Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, denied us the opportunity to have nuclear plants that would be open today.
And nuclear is a very clean,
of course
generally
it is.
quite
and the
safe
man's
way
a
of doing
fool.
power.
And then you've got that absolute fool, Ed Davey, who now runs the Liberal Democrats. I can't believe people are considering voting for them again after what they did in the last coalition government, boasting about the fact that in 2019 he denied this country fracking. It was insanity. The Conservatives should never have gone along with it, but of course they were reliant on the Lib Dems in a coalition government, and it was a huge mistake. Now, Boris Johnson only has a few days left in the top job, but there has been a campaign for his return since he was unceremoniously ousted by his own MPs just last month. Over the weekend, former Tory Minister Rory Stewart was the latest to claim Bojo could make a comeback like Berlusconi or Trump. Quizzed about the suggestion today during a visit to a broadband site in Wiltshire, Boris blasted his way through an answer without ever ruling out becoming PM again. Watch.
And there's been a lot of chat over the weekend about a comeback, potentially. Are you going to go to the back benches? Are you going to get out of politics? What's your plan after next Tuesday?
I'm concentrating on today. When I was campaigning to become Prime Minister 3 or 4 years ago, it was all about gigabit broadband. Because I know how important it is.
We've had a lot of gigabit broadband. We're already being tapped on the shoulder, Prime Minister. Will you rule out a comeback at all?
What I want to talk to you about.
But we've had a big chunky question on the fantastic rural broadband. Will you rule out a comeback, Prime Minister?
People are far more interested, in my view, than I humbly submit to you. Okay, you can disagree if you like, but I think, on the whole, people in this country are more interested in their gigabit broadband than they are in the fate of this or that politician.
Well, he's wrong about that, but why on earth should he rule it out? I mean, opinion polling from just 2 weeks ago shows Conservative Party members still massively prefer him to either of the current candidates. And there's a strong argument, Calvin Robinson, that he could win another general election for the Conservatives. So look, I know there's two schools of thought about this, but I don't think he should be forced to either declare he has an interest in staying in politics or rule it out at this stage.
I've lost all faith in him. I think all the businesses that struggled throughout lockdown that he brought on, the ones that survived are going to be killed through this cost of living crisis. All of this is under his tenure. I've lost all faith in the man, to be honest with you.
Dawn Neeson?
Yeah, I must admit, I agree with Calvin on this one. I mean, it's like, you know, if there is a box on any form at the moment that says none of the above, it's like, how did we end up with these three?
I know.
Sorry.
It's really interesting, Rebecca, when I'm speaking to senior people in the Conservative Party who are very close to Boris Johnson, they are adamant he believes he can come back and that he will come back. However, all of them say the chances of it happening are so slim. However, we have seen crazy things happen in British politics over the past year.
If you want to know what Boris Johnson is planning to do, pick up any biography of Winston Churchill. That is his playbook. Yeah. And this is exactly what happened. Absolutely. Winston Churchill, he was in, and then he was out, and then he was back in. And that is, I think, probably... Too. And I think there's a lot of suggestion that that's probably where it's going to go. Because he's not very imaginative. You can predict what he's going to do.
Well, of course. And Calvin, Boris would view the COVID pandemic as his World War II.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, Churchill
and Ukraine.
Initially wasn't supported by the public, and then the British public realised, actually, he is our greatest Prime Minister. We made a huge mistake.
And if there's anyone that could come back, it's Boris Johnson.
100%.
Yeah.
We'll go and do some paintings, write some fiction, back in 4 years, probably.
And look, one thing's for certain, he is going to make a huge amount of money over the next couple of years.
Well, he needs it. How many kids has he got? Like 45?
He does need it. And what's fascinating about that, Dawn, is he's one of those rare beasts who will be able to make lots of money while enhancing his political
I do not. I mean, it's called Teflon, isn't it? I mean, it's like, you know, nothing sticks to him. It doesn't matter what he does. People still like.
But he's got gold wallpaper and school fees to deal with.
I think, look, whatever you think about Boris Johnson, I think we can all admit this is not a John Major situation. This is not a Theresa May situation. No. This is not a David Cameron situation.
I'd bring back
it's not
Theresa
a Gordon Brown
May.
situation. What?
He caused all of this mess.
What?
I don't just say the stuff to upset you.
I think sometimes...
Or
Rebecca,
Gordon Brown.
I think today someone's giving you a list of things. What will really annoy Dan?
Nicola Sturgeon.
Defund the police. Scrap the army, bring back Theresa May. Do you know how much Theresa May's catastrophic decisions, including, by the way, on the energy price cap, have led us to where we are today?
Net zero?
I just feel like everyone deserves a second chance.
I think we should ban Kentucky Fried Chicken while we're at it. That's
Nando's is better than KFC.
Oh, my goodness.
Much healthier.
That's true.
OK.
Salads.
I'm convinced now. They are just purposely winding me up. Dawn Neeson, I will never go to a restaurant and order a macrobiotic salad like you. Did I even get the name right? A macrobiotic? Did I say it right? What is it, Dawn? What is it?
It was healthy.
What's macrobiotic?
It was very tasty.
The biotics are really big.
It was tasteless. Rebecca Reid, Calvin Robinson, Dawn Neeson, do stand by, because coming up, after the final president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, dies aged 91. Will he take the crown of honorary Greatest Britain? Find out as I choose my GBUJ winners at 10:50. But first, in Uncancelled, after violent crime plagues the Notting Hill Carnival, does Sadiq Khan have blood on his hands over the state of lawless London? BBC TV star Shabs Ahmad thinks so. He's got some stern words just after we take a very quick look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as the battle for number 10 reaches its climax and frontrunner Liz Truss's cabinet starts to take shape, what position might there be for her rival turned ally Penny Mordaunt, as our likely next PM aims to get Britain back on track? And does she have any regrets about her own failed leadership bid? Penny Mordaunt joins me live in the studio for an exclusive interview fresh from the final hustings of the fiercely contested Tory leadership race. Plus, political firebrand Anne Widdecombe and columnist extraordinaire Rod Little weigh in on the stories that matter to you, and I'll break down the day's biggest headlines with my superstar panel, media personality Christine Hamilton, publican and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
I'll be shortly announcing who today's Greatest Britain and Union jackass are, but first it's time for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. The crime wave sweeping the UK shows no sign of letting up as lawless London becomes a hotbed of stabbings, murder and violent assault over the bank holiday weekend. Notting Hill Carnival, which saw around 2 million people descend on the streets of the capital after a 2-year COVID hiatus, ended in tragedy as 21-year-old Takeo Nembrad from Bristol was stabbed to death. The Metropolitan Police have confirmed that 6 other people were stabbed across the 3-day event, with over 200 arrests made and what's believed to be a record number of knives seized. On top of this, 74 police officers were injured while patrolling the carnival, many as a result of being assaulted. But the chaos in Notting Hill was just a snapshot of the violence ravaging what is fast becoming the crime capital of Europe. Watch.
Oh my God!
Just appalling. And as failed London Mayor Sadiq Khan continues to let the city descend into lawlessness, people are fast losing patience, including star of the BBC's supercar superfan, Shabs Ahmad. He thinks the mayoral dud is running the city into the ground, and he joins me now. So, Shabs, you went viral for a very strong attack on Sadiq Khan. You actually think the bloke has blood on his hands. Why are you so angry, Shabs?
Well...
I'm with you, by the way.
Well, look, at the end of the day, Sadiq Khan has a responsibility, right? And he's in charge of strategic policing in London. And if we can't turn to him to sort out what's going on the streets of London, then who are we supposed to turn to? I mean, look, there's communities that are facing a lot of backlash for certain things that are occurring in those communities. But at the end of the day, every community needs to stand up for themselves and turn to their own people to do something about it. Now, with what's happening in London, let's just talk about the thefts in central London.
Oh, I know. Well, I've been mugged 3 times in the past 3 years.
You see, there's people coming from abroad, there's tourism. Sadiq Khan's in charge of tourism. Sadiq Khan's also in charge of the policing, strategic policing in central London. Now, everybody's talking about the Tory cuts and how there's less and shortage of police, but just a half mile up the road from, say, where Kensington Chelsea, where the lady was attacked, there's police stopping innocent bystanders and innocent drivers who are maybe not wearing any seatbelts, and they're being stopped and fined. And everything that, they can gain money from, i.e. the ULEZ charge, the congestion charge.
Oh, yeah, that hill patrol.
Exactly. And
that hill patrol. And, Shabs, what I found so shocking is that you say you drive around London now with your 2-year-old in your car.
Of course.
And you actually are in fear.
Look, cream developments is what we've been doing for a very long time. We've been customising motor vehicles, and for the last 15 years or so, we've been driving into central London in a convoy of cars. And I've been taking my son, my daughter with me, my wife with me, and now we're at a point where I'm living in fear. We weren't born with a silver spoon in our mouth, and we've slowly built up what we have today and earned our money to be able to afford nice cars, nice jewellery, nice watches, and we shouldn't be going to central London thinking twice about whether we should put our roofs down or thinking twice about whether we should wear our jewellery and thinking more about protecting our passenger, who's a 2-year-old little girl.
We shouldn't even have to have that thought, should we? You're completely right. I mean, after my muggings now, and look, I'm a big bloke, so I was completely safe. It wasn't about that, but it's about the fact that I literally can't pull out my mobile phone on the street. It's impossible.
You know what? It's sad because, like, the last straw for me was when the lady was attacked. And this is what made me comment what I commented. Now, she's been attacked. It was like a daylight sexual assault. That's what it seemed like. The screaming, you know, there was bystanders taking videos. Now, her fella was there to protect her. I'm not sure if it was a fella or a friend or a partner, but he was there to protect. And he could have very easily been stabbed in this whole incident. And if he wasn't stabbed, he could have been put in a position to fight these thieves off. So somebody would have got hurt, he could have killed them, they could have killed him. At the end of the day, Sadiq Khan will end up having blood on his hands. Now, I've got nothing against Sadiq Khan in person, as I've met him many times. He's a nice guy. But what would he do if this was his mother, daughter, sister? What would he do? He would do something about it. Now, like, we're adhering to all his policies that he's pushing forward, right? He's got the, like I said, the ULEZ, the congestion, and, you know, I drive to central London, and because my car's a certain decibel, I end up getting a £100 fine when I'm on State Street.
So we pay all of his fines, yet he still doesn't protect us. I think you have put it.
It's a violation of human rights here.
It is.
There's a violation of human rights. Like, you've got, your road tax goes up, we adhere to that. You know, the insurance tax goes up, we adhere to that.
Exactly.
But,
so
you know, he's
protect us.
Exactly.
Protect
That's
us.
it. And then you've
he's
got...
not.
Like,
no, indeed, I couldn't agree more. And as you say, he has blood on his hands, in my view. That was the BBC's super fam star, Shabs Ahmed.
Can I just say
Thank
one
you
last
so much.
thing?
Yes, of course, final word.
OK, basically, look, like QAE and the tourism that comes into the country, he's in charge of that as well. And it was really unfair and not a nice position to put that QAE who had the hammer in his window and his Bugatti Chiron.
Yeah.
Right? And for him to be labelled QAE Playboy, which is derogatory, because at the end of the day, it's almost as though you're trying to paint a picture that he deserves it.
He's safe to drive around London.
But he should be protected, because
no, indeed.
you can't love Arab
Shabs,
money.
Very good point.
But not love the Arabs.
For making it. Thank you so much, Shabs. It's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Dawn Neeson, who is your greatest Britain nominee?
It's a collective one. It's going to be all the amazing dancers, women, children and men that took part in the Notting Hill Carnival parades. There were an awful lot of good people having a good time. It's not all about the bad stuff.
Yeah, all the ones without knives. Calvin Robinson, your nominee.
Mine is honorary, and it's Mikhail Gorbachev. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven.
And look, there it is, the ad I talked about earlier in the show, where Mikhail Gorbachev literally was promoting capitalism by signing up to Pizza Hut. I loved it. Rebecca Reid, I love Pizza Hut too, by the way. Rebecca Reid, your nominee?
I can't do a whole programme without mentioning Taylor Swift, but I have a legitimate reason to this week, because she announced that she has a new album coming out on the 21st of October, which just happens to be Kim Kardashian's birthday.
Oh, I know, I've got to choose my own. It's got to be Mikhail Gorbachev. Look, I think his legacy is mixed. I don't think he was the perfect man, but at the end of the day, when you think about what he tried to do, bringing Russia into the West, that is something that should be celebrated, and it's a shame where we've got to. Dawn Neeson, your Union Jackass nominee.
It's going to be Harry, the bloke formerly known as Prince. While I don't care what a failed American actress actually says pretty much on anything, I do care that Prince Harry has obviously condoned her interview and podcast on the 25th anniversary, which is tomorrow, of his mum's death.
I know. What absolutely grim timing. Could not agree more. Calvin Robinson, your nominee?
Sadiq Khan, because he said that Carnival sent out all the right vibes. We had police officers twerking, we had mass crowds of degeneracy, sexual assaults, 200 arrests, stabbing, and men punching women in the face.
And Rebecca Reid, your Union Jackass nominee.
Priti Patel for continuing to say a really rude, mean thing and then do nothing about it, therefore meaning that everybody on the political spectrum is annoyed with her.
Do you know what? It's a double win for Calvin tonight, because, of course, it's got to be Sadiq Khan. Listening to Shabs there and Uncancelled as well, it just makes it abundantly clear why London's failed mayor, and he is a failed mayor, has his priorities all wrong. Dawn Neeson, Calvin Robinson, Rebecca Reid, my absolutely fabulous superstar panel. Thank you all so much. I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Penny Mordaunt will be with me live in the studio. Headliners time now, though. Thank you for your company tonight. Good night.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The weather stays relatively benign during the next 24 hours. Clear spells, dry for most. Some showers around, but not an awful lot, and those showers will mainly affect the east coast, where a breeze is blowing from the North Sea at the moment because of high pressure to the north of the UK. That high pressure extending its influence across the country, keeping weather fronts from moving in from the Atlantic for the time being and keeping things relatively clear and dry. But there will be some areas of cloud overnight. There'll still be some showers affecting eastern parts of Yorkshire, eastern parts of Lincolnshire, for example. And where we've got that breeze stirring things up, temperatures will hold up